Sei gegrüßt, hallo.
Morgen. Yeah, well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. And welcome to our second day of the Future Tech IP Summit, day one of our London IP Week. Yeah, now I have the honor to give some introductory words and hopefully also to guide us through the day. Let me first introduce Stefan Wolke, heading the IP department of ThyssenKrupp. Yeah, we are all participating in a hugely exciting phase of technology development. And trends of the recent years include significant progress in areas such as artificial intelligence and everywhere digitalization, which I also could see every day in the rooms of my boys at home. Yeah, digitalization everywhere. Application of digital technologies, digital options in all our areas, not only in B2C life, but of course also in all aspects of B2B life. And resulting in individual supply chains, in autonomous machines, in autonomous vehicles. Friday on the Airbus IP Summit, we discussed autonomous flying machines, not unmanned but manned. So it's significant, interesting developments to come. And these trends generate options, on the one hand side, for the effectiveness of IP. That means applying results of artificial intelligence in other areas of applications. That's on the effectiveness side extremely interesting. But on the other hand side, we also have the efficiency topic. That means generating IP with the help of artificial intelligence in a much more efficient way. So yesterday we discussed the conditions of applying IP from one industry to the other and in new areas of application. So that's on the effectiveness side. But today we will very much discuss the efficiency aspect of using artificial intelligence for the generation of IP, or to think about IP. That means automation of processes using AI technologies, the usage of IP data and analytics to support business-related decision-making and all that stuff. Additionally, we'll also hear about the question whether artificial intelligence is a benevolent innovator or a patent destroyer. And of course, we are also in discussions with the European Patent Office about automatic generation of IP and all that stuff. We will also hear about monetization of IP with a session about tech transfer and discussion about the options of R&D exploitation and IP commercialization. And I think most important, I would like to encourage everyone here in the room for an open and fruitful discussion. Please take the opportunity after all panel discussions to discuss with the people sitting here in order to have a lively day. One organizational remark, you all have these nice cords here. And there is a USB stick, and on the USB stick you have all the materials from the conference. So it's extremely well organized, and you have all the materials already on hand. Good. With that, let us start the day. We will start with our keynote speech. So let me introduce, well, where do we have our first speaker? Let me introduce Santosh Mhetri. He is the global head of IP products solutions from Bureau van Dijk. So it's all yours.
Thank you. Thanks, Stephen. Cool. Morning, everyone. So I'm Santosh Mhetri. I come from Bureau van Dijk. So just wanted to start with knowing how many of you have heard about Bureau van Dijk before? Couple of them. And Moody's? Cool. Yeah, so we are part of both of the companies anyways. And yeah, so Bureau van Dijk is a Belgian company. We are based out of Brussels. And we specialize in company data for the last 30 years. And we bring in company data not just for listed companies, but also privately held and privately owned companies. And that's pretty unique to us. There is a lot that we can derive when we really combine and integrate company data with patent data. So how and really what can we do with company data? I'll cover that in the session today. What do we talk about challenges within the IP industry? We commonly talk about IP, teams are moving constantly from being cost centers to profit centers. So there's a constant pressure for them to monetize and commercialize the IP. And over the last decade or so, companies have been heavily focusing on their KPI being how many patents they can file. Or do they file within the given financial year? But now companies are more thinking about how much money are they bringing in using those IP, or what is the real value behind those intellectual property. And again, we talk about patent ownership issues. There are quite a lot of tools in the market which talk about ownership information and patent, but nobody still is able to link patents to the respective corporate ownership groups, because most of the ownership structures that these tools rely on only focus on listed entities. So there is a significant amount of patent, a patent portfolio that's been held by privately held companies. It's pretty important to have the data on privately held companies, and SMEs are pretty important in the current digital era. So also, within the solution that Bureau van Dijk is bringing to the market, which is called Orbis Intellectual Property, we bring the best of both worlds. So you have exhaustive patent data. You could do everything that you could do with patent data, plus also the company data. So why really company data is useful and how it can really be useful. From the 1950s, it's taken about 50 years, and within the last 50 years, about 80% of the Fortune 500 companies have been wiped away. And now it's predicted that within the next 15 years, or every 10 to 15 years, you will have about 30% of the Fortune 500 companies, being wiped. So what that means is, for larger companies, there is a threat, and you have to be up to date with what's happening in the market, what technologies are coming out, and mainly from SMEs, because today we are talking about AI, we talk about machine learning, and all these technologies heavily rely on digital technologies, and also the shelf life is really small, and therefore if you don't focus on companies before their patents are being published, then you're missing out on these companies. So that's what we bring to the table. As you can see, there are 3 times the number of companies as there are patents globally. So within our tool, we cover all companies, irrespective of whether they have patents or not. So that brings out a huge opportunity, because there are only about 2 million companies out of 300 million companies which have IP in their portfolio. So for the rest of the 298 million companies, we have their R&D information, their products and services. So that really allows you to focus on those companies for commercialization, collaboration, cross-licensing, and so on and so forth. We also do have one of the most exhaustive corporate ownership structures, and we also do have patent transactions, M&A transactions, and also the SEP patents. And so when we talk about company data, there's quite a lot that we combine and seamlessly integrate. So the first one being corporate ownership, through which we uncover hidden patent portfolios of holding companies and shell companies, which really helps, because in the current scenario you see a lot of NPE entities, and also now corporate entities are trying to have shell companies or holding entities to file their patents. So that's something that we do. We also can help you identify industry trends through industry sector information. We talk about patent intelligence, landscaping reports, or whatever it is, but if you're just focusing on IPC classes and keyword analysis, you're still stuck with the very old patent data. I mean, patent data is really essential, don't get me wrong, but only when you expand out of patent data, you can really bring out really intelligent insights. So here you can start focusing on telecom sector and look at what's happening in the telecom sector within the telecom patenting landscape. So you can see the new and upcoming trends. You can look at spillover technologies because we also have entity type information. So you can look at patents just by educational institutes, by academics. You can also look at what sort of PE firms or financial institutions are heavily investing on IP as collateral. With the financial information, you could also look at SME firms and large firms, so easily distinguish between them. Patent valuations, again, one of the heavily argued subject, but at least there should be a starting point, and that's what we have brought to the market. We work with a company called Intracom, who are very well respected in the market, who are used as expert witness in litigation cases and so on and so forth. So we do provide both quantitative and qualitative aspects of patent valuations. And finally, M&A transactions, we have a subsidiary that really gives the most exhaustive information on M&A transactions. Also, patent transactions, we do cover not just from the legal status updates, but we also have a team covering patent transactions since a long time. And that brings to the table transaction data before they're even declared at the legal source. So that also allows us to bucket transactions into different deal types. This could be pretty interesting for looking at who is selling what and who is buying what, so you can be very efficient in your commercialization process. So now looking at how company data can be really useful. So rather than looking at the patent filings by volume, you can look at patent filings by value, and that immediately gives you the top jurisdictions for patent filing. Again, looking at patent transactions, you can immediately identify who's buying, who's selling, and also look at the recent trends based on rumored and announced transactions, not just the completed ones, but also classify these transactions into different different entities that are heavily investing and divesting their assets. Again, it's very easy with the tool to identify companies with falling or declining financials versus increasing portfolio value. So these are the sort of entities that you can work with, that you could think of acquiring if you're a large company who have high value IP in their portfolio. But also you can learn quite a lot from their mistakes. Looking at why has the strategy mismatch between the business strategy and the IP strategy. So as I mentioned, with the entity type information, you can very easily identify different stakeholders within a given technology landscape. And it becomes easy for you to find possible technology partners. And this is the gap that we are talking about here. Because if you see companies that own IP and companies that don't own IP, there is a huge chunk of data that we normally miss if we are only focusing on patent data. So that's really the essence. And that's really key in not just commercialization, but also keeping up with the pace with which the market is moving. So again, you can dig down deep into the entities, identify within pretty easily what a company is doing, and also look at the key value within their portfolio. Where does the value lie? What technologies are really important? But also with patent valuations, it's very easy for not just looking at what technologies are heavily interesting in the market, but also looking at portfolio pruning and portfolio maintenance as well to identify which patents are really essential and which patents are not. So that's pretty much it from what we do and what we cover. But again, just wanted to summarize that company data element really brings a whole new dimension to patent analytics, whether it is patent transactions, commercialization, or day-to-day patent insights and strategy. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot. I think that gave some interesting insight what is possible with data. Yeah, let's move to our first panel discussion. And so let me ask the panelists to show up. So we will discuss the importance of technology in managing IP. On the panel discussion, So we just need the cables. So we will discuss, first of all, the current landscape of managing inventions, patents, trademarks, the automation of processes using these technologies, how to use patent data and data analytics to support business-related decisions. So all the stuff I mentioned under IP efficiency. The real-life examples, how AI has improved the management of IP so far. And we as a company are working together with some startups in that area as well, so we are also observing the landscape quite intensively. The future of IP management system for in-house counsels and private practice professionals, and the IP intelligence as a critical component of business strategy. I think that's a general topic, yeah? How to get IP into the boardroom, yeah? and to provide the management with relevant information beyond the pure IP, yeah? Which gives us much more attention time and attention span at our CEOs and board members. I think that's quite important, and we generated a lot of examples in the recent years for that. So on the panel we will have, on the one hand side, well, if you yeah, so welcome. Just take a seat.
Chair to sit. You want me to sit on the side here? I can sit on the side.
At least the microphones are working.
Yeah.
Very good. So we have Brigitte Anderson, CEO of the Big Innovation Center. We have Nigel Switcher, CEO of Aistemos. We have Satish Tiwari, Head of IP Analytics at Airbus. And Zee Fischer, CEO of Pekama, and well, Nicole Belfiore, professional of functional design, but probably
Belfiore, that's right.
Nicola Belfiore.
Nicola.
Okay, professor of functional design and applied mechanics at the Università Roma Tre. So now it's all.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and good morning, everybody. And we clearly look forward to a very exciting hour on the importance of technology in managing IP. And just before I introduce further the panel and let them speak, I just want to say one minute on what do we mean by the managing IP. Of course, intellectual property rights is all used for strategic purposes, and that is something that's really been a passion of myself, to see how can you actually, from the economics and management perspective, generate the value from the IP, and what is the role of technology now with AI, blockchain, but before that just with computerized information. How can we actually generate more value? And what is the value we are looking for? Of course, we mostly know just value from licensing revenue, so direct income from market transactions, or cost cuttings by saving royalties and maybe a patent pool, or a kind of finding increasing ability to raise venture capital. These are kind of straightforward transactional value. But we also have the issues of value of corporate competitiveness, positioning in the marketplace, professional recognition and signaling for your patents, and actually also we need to focus on the areas of beyond patents, because of course there are lots of other types of IP which we could be looking at. We're probably not looking at so much in this session here, but we also have, of course, copyrights and open source and public domain knowledge. There's also another element of strategic management which we just heard of here in the presentation, and that was very much the innovation aspect, clearly the aspect of where we use patents and copyrights and other forms of IP, whether in direct market transactions or in open source, as a methodology to create better innovative solutions. So it's very important that there's some matching in different technologies in complex, what we call complex technological systems. So clearly that's very important. So making also and using common standards are very important, and complementary IP. So that's the innovation aspect. And at the very end, of course, there is a strategic elements of IP where you actually are building formal and even informal relationships to your IP, and that you become part of networks, and that you have increasing ability to enter collaborative agreements. And sometimes you just patent because you want to make sure that it goes to the public domain, so you basically just give it out to the public domain. So we know lots of health patents from lots of different companies, and some pharmaceutical patents that just go straight into the community. So we have all these strategic aspects. So I'm sure that we'll be commenting on those when we're looking here at the importance of managing IP. And of course, I'm sure also we're going to hear about all the obstacles in this on value and price and transaction, transparency, etc. So let us just go straight to the panel now. So I think I'll just start to introduce the panel from my right side and introduce Satis Tivera. And I'll soon give everybody like a few or more, a little bit more time to explain themselves. But he is head of IP at Airbus and a specialist in IP, the strategic analytics of IP. Previous IP manager at General Electric and has a PhD in physical science. Yes, yeah, interesting. So maybe that would be an interesting perspective. Next to him, we have Sheo Pekama, who is CEO, Sheo Fisher, who is CEO of Pekama, and also very much specialized in valuing and pricing IPs. I look forward to hear what he has to say about this. And prior to this, managing partner in Fresh IP. And then we have Nigel Schwarzer, who is very famous for his Cypher analytical tool, which was the first analytical tool that could really do proper aggregated and visualization of IP data for strategic purposes. So I'm sure he has a lot to contribute here. And previously, as a lawyer, background as head of technology at Olswang and partner at Slaughter and May. And finally, so we have a really variety panel here. We got Nicolas Delfoy, and who is professor in dynamic, in functional design and applied mechanics, and the specialist in dynamic modeling. And this is professor at University of the Rome 3?
Roma 3.
Roma 3, yes. And so we're going to get more like a thought leadership from the ground perspective. But if you just say like a few words about how you came yourself to look at the importance of technology in managing IP before you actually come with your arguments, just you get like 30 seconds to introduce yourself and just how you came to sit here.
Okay. My name is Satish Tiwari. I am the head of IP analytics and intelligence for Airbus. My job is to look at intellectual property, including patents, but other kind of intellectual properties, from the strategic point of view, and find out the actionable strategic recommendations for the Airbus leadership. So it is a bit of a different job than a head of IP job, which is my boss, Alistair Scott. For me, the full-time job is to look at our competitors, suppliers, other partners, see what they're patenting, and try to predict exactly what their business plans are. It's a big deal, but very, very interesting and challenging.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And Seb?
Yeah, so I run a company called Pekama. We build a clever IP dashboard. It's a software company. The premise is that the more data companies will have on their IP, the more intelligent and informed decisions they can make. And part of that data is pricing data, but yeah, I'm not a pricing expert. It's, part of the data that we provide, and because pricing data is interesting and useful.
Yeah, that's definitely very useful. And Nigel?
So I'm Nigel Schweitzer. It's probably just worth saying again what Birgitta said at the beginning, that my background for 25 years was as an IP lawyer. So I think with all these discussions, you need to start with why. So why do I believe that AI technology can help? And the answer is because I spent 15 years doing it the manual way, and there are better and more efficient ways of integrating technology. But we'll talk a bit more, I assume, as the debate unfolds.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and at the very end here, we have Nicola.
Yeah, good morning. So my name is Nicola Belfiore. I teach applied mechanics at the University of Rome. It's the third youngest university in our large city. And as you know, university has a basic mission teaching, scientific and technology research, and also exploitation. So that's why some years ago we invented some new patents, and then the basic question was to patent or not to patent. So that's a very difficult answer to give. And so I was very interested in studying the development of the process of patenting and the application, convenience, or do that. And basically, I'm here to learn from
thank you very much.
This panel.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, and of course the discussion of to patent to not to patent, I think that has been, as you said, well addressed. But to my knowledge, everybody knows that we have many different strategies coming up with companies, and the same companies, both patents and not patents, and put things into open source.
Well, maybe artificial intelligence could.
That's something we can discuss later. Okay. So now let us start. So if each of you could make clear in about 6-7 minutes on what your core argument is on the importance of technology in managing IP. And Satis, if you could start.
Yeah. So for me, as I told, my job is to watch and try to predict what is happening. For us, it will be good if I just take an example. And for us, there is no better example than Boeing. We are in a sort of a duopoly situation, Airbus and Boeing. Our products are similar. We are in a position where it is very important for us to know what kind of a product or what kind of a new service our competitor is going to come out with. So my challenge is to look at patents and other kind of IP that Boeing might be developing, and try to predict what is going on, what they are coming up with. Commercial aviation, which is the big part of Airbus and Boeing both thing, is now going through a process of change. We are no longer just a hardware company where we make our aircraft and sell it to our customers and they fly the way they see fit, because flying efficiency has become very important. With new technologies developing, connected flight has become very important. Fuel efficiency is very, very important, both for the cost reasons and for the reasons of green energy. So I place myself, though I am in a part of IP department, I place myself as one of the subsections of competitive intelligence department of Airbus. And my job, again, as I told, is to give from patent side to our leadership what exactly they should be aware of, what they should think is coming. So some of the things we watch, for example, looking at patents, if I take that as an example, some of the things we watch is what are the themes of patenting that Boeing is doing? What are the basic themes? And Boeing is a large company. They patent almost 1,000 to 1,200 patent applications per year. We are going to have a look at what they're filing, and also to make value judgments on their filings. For example, we are going to see if a particular patent is a piece of a portfolio that they're developing, if that portfolio is going into a product, or is it somebody's favorite idea which they have been filing for 20 years and they'll again file if they're alive for 20 more years. So these are the questions. The questions also could be, is a particular technology being developed doable today, or in 5 years, or in 20 years? Remember that our product has a life cycle of 30 years. So even something which is going to be ready in 20 years is not going to be completely useless to us. The aircraft we are building today will be flying 30 years from now. So for that, some of the things that we look at are, for example, what is the TRL of a particular portfolio, where in the technology readiness level the portfolio has come, where in the value chain the portfolio sits, and whether the value chain is ready or not. For example, you might be making something, but you may not be able to have a supply chain for that, or you may not have enough material. For example, you might make an aircraft made of plutonium, but you don't have enough plutonium in the world to make all those aircraft. So these are the questions we try to answer looking at the patterns, the development of the portfolio, and especially what I call the deltas, the behavioral change in patenting of a company. We try to find those jumps, the delta changes in patenting behavior of the company in all kind of things, in either a completely new technology coming back or a particular part. For example, manufacturing. For last 7 years, Boeing's manufacturing patents are dominated by digital manufacturing and digital twins and digital continuity, those kind of things. We might even look at something like, for example, Boeing, say, I'm just taking a random example, which is not a true example. Say Boeing was patenting or foreign filing 0 number of applications concerned with landing gear in Korea, and then they start filing applications in landing gear in Korea. So what's going on? Are they developing a new supplier? Or are they coming out of their relationship with an old supplier and going to a new supplier? All these kind of questions look for those delta functions. Now, a lot of these are we are able to get from automated tools, but a lot of these we are not able to because this is a continuously developing field and the tools are still being developed in those areas. And that is my interest from this panel. I would like to give these ideas so that the people who develop the tools, artificial intelligence tools, know my point of view, so that they can bring out the tools, and that will make my life easier. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you. So artificial intelligence tools and other smart tools for patent portfolio management. Yes, that's definitely a challenge. So I'm sure we'll come back to this. And so Nigel, will you pick up from here?
Sure. Thank you, Satish, for setting that up nicely. So why build tools? The panel's called AI and Technology. And the first, when Birgitta said that I'm famous, it's not always in a good way. There was an article in the Sunday Times magazine that said, under a picture of me, it goes, Nigel Schweitzer says, robots will replace all legal jobs. And I never actually said that. I mean, I don't even believe that. But if I paint a picture, and this is all written up in Forbes, and we have a representative Arm here today. Arm was recently bought by a Japanese company, SoftBank, for several tens of billions. And the lawyers, typically, Slaughter and May, as it happened, acted for Arm, and Freshfield acted for SoftBank, and Arm was the target. And normally, you would go and send a team of between 5 and 10 lawyers into a room. Arm own a lot of patents, by the way. They own billions of revenue from licensing revenue. The IP is central to the corporate strategy. No wonder they wanted to look at the IP before they parted with their tens of billions. So the lawyers know that that's their job. So they go into a room and start counting. Number 1, a patent on floating point. Number 2, a patent on fabric. And they keep on reading until they assemble the 10,000 patent assets into 1,500 families. And then they say, I wonder whether they paid the renewal fees. And they go, yes, number 1, I'll go and ring up the European Patent Office. Number 2, I'll go and ring up the French Patent Office. And that process goes on until 10 human beings stagger out of the dark 4 weeks later and come up with the answer, Arm owns some patents. And they paid the renewal fees. Who knew? But what we're trying to do is to imagine, with technology, those tasks that are manual, that can usefully be replaced by machines. So really important for those people who are either in private practice advising companies, or those people who are in companies who frankly are ahead of you. Spend time talking to Satish what Airbus are doing, what Arm are doing, Stefan, our chairman, what ThyssenKrupp are doing. They are ahead of you in the use of technology, and you need to get ahead of it. Now, what is AI? AI is the use of technology to replace tasks that can be done by humans with more efficient techniques for doing it by machines. Machines are awesome. I mean awesome at counting and sorting. The task of, back to the Arm SoftBank due diligence exercise, that task, which used to take 4 weeks, was done in 3 days. So that takes out a very significant amount of time. And time is really important when pricing a public on public deal, the cost was reduced from both sides by £100,000. And what did Cipher do in that transaction? It found the ARM patents inside a complex group. It compared it to all other companies that might be interesting if you're thinking of buying a semiconductor company. So Intel have some chips, I believe, and Qualcomm owns some patents perhaps, and so do NVIDIA and so do AMD. And they all have portfolios of tens of thousands of patent families, and you've got to be able to compare it. So number one is do not be afraid. Please engage with technology. The second question I wanted to touch on is when they say patent data for decision making, what kind of decisions are being made? So the USP that I think I had when we set the company up was I'd spent 20 years thinking about the problem. So if you're a data scientist somewhere in the room or somewhere in the world, don't think, I have some technology, I shall build a product and hope there's a market for it. Think really hard about what companies like Airbus, ARM, ThyssenKrupp want from you. So this is what I think they want from you. They want you to solve the 5 biggest problems in front of them. And they are, why do I own so many patents? That was the Lenovo question to their chief IP counsel. You can own a lot because you can file a lot, and there's an industry out there will file for as many as you can, as many as you want. But just because you can file doesn't mean that you should file. So how many is enough? The second question is from your R&D teams. Typically, they end up funding either directly or indirectly the budget, and what they want is competitive intelligence. Yeah. They want what Satish is offering, the idea that you can spot trends. The third problem you have is in a world of technology disruption, you need to do deals. Sometimes they're licensing, collaborations, joint ventures, and sometimes they're straight M&A. So that information needs to, a topic we were discussing in Toulouse last week, Satish, that information needs to be provided early. Litigation is on the increase. Fourth topic, litigation is on the increase across all sectors impacted by technology disruption. The Bureau van Dijk speaker at the beginning said that a huge number of Fortune 500 companies were wiped out in the last 20 years. They don't exist. There's a complete change of cohort, and that's going to happen again. And the final one is licensing. If companies invest these, and it's not just millions, it's tens of millions. The aggregate spend on patents, I think, is now estimated to be $1 trillion. If you're going to spend that much on the asset class, and if there are all the difficulties that Ziv is probably going to touch on, and BVD already touched on about valuing these assets, they need to work for a living. And working for a living means they need typically to be commercialized and licensed, and that's another problem that needs to be solved. Just a final point on why now, and then I'll stop talking, I promise, Birgitte. Maybe I won't. Anyway, no, so why now? 3 reasons. Number one, there's more digitized data. We'll come back to the topic of transparency. You can't do data analytics unless you have data. So there's more data relating to patents, to litigation, to licensing, and many of the other aspects that go into a computation. Number two, AI algorithms. Algorithms generally need fast and efficient compute power, and that's a lot of computing. So if we'd have set this company up 10 years ago, we would have needed about $10 million worth of servers in order to run the computations. Now you plug into AWS, and so thank you, cloud, for making all of these things possible. And the third and final reason, and my last point before I say I hand over, is to the demand. I am properly old. I started doing IP 30 years ago. In those days, it was pharma patents and maybe the edge of technology. Now you can't look at a single sector without seeing the impact of technology, and huge sectors, aerospace and defense, being disrupted by drones or cybersecurity or 3D printing. Cars, of course, you take away a steering wheel and replace it with autonomous driving, take away the engine and replace it by a battery. This is systemic disruption, and as more industries are being disrupted, more industries need better information.
Thank you very much, Nigel. It's really great to see how information technology or digitalization is used to really solve purposeful strategic issues for companies and not just litigation, because that's what we always read about, but actually to see how it is by lawyers also applied to the purposeful strategic management of IP. So that's I think that's a change that has been happening over the last 7 to 10 years. I don't think that's how it has used to be. So that's great. So if I can turn to you, Siv, to hear, it'd be great to hear, maybe you want to come into valuing IP, or I look forward to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, so I don't deal with value of IP at all. It's just not my space. I deal with pricing, which is a completely different issue.
Is that different? Okay.
But yeah. So, right. So I go to these sort of conferences. I've been going to. So I used to be a lawyer in IP lawyer in private practice. I've been going to these conferences for maybe 12 years now, and I also go to tech conferences now, and it's quite an interesting comparison. There are lots of similarities. There are also lots of differences. The age of the crowd is one of them. And the diversity in all sorts of other ways. Was one kind of difference that really touches me every time is that in tech conferences, it's a lot about the why are we doing this, and it's almost people are almost obsessed with we're going to change the world in this way and in that way, and I'm lacking that question in legal conferences. I mean, the why, what's the point? I mean, obviously, we all do what we do to make money. I mean, everyone does what they do to make money, but there needs to be something else as well. And I think we all really want to be good at what we do. And the obvious way to be good at what we do in the legal profession is to embrace what's new. So being on top of new legislation and case law is something that we've always done well, and something that we must do. But if we fail to accept that the world is moving on and there are new ways to do things, and they are better from a private practice perspective, they are better for the clients, and from an in-house perspective, they are better for the client, which is the company, then we're just not doing our job very well. So that's the why. I mean, there's better ways to do things. I don't think it's true today. I think it was true always. And it's AI has matured today, but automation was always available, and it was always not used enough. So I think that the why is really because we want to be good at it. And I think that's why everyone's here, because we want to be good at what we do. So on that kind of, and I guess on a practical level, the 4 things that I wrote when I got 6 minutes. So 2 things that I actually deal with. Valuation is not one of them, and 2 things that I'm planning to deal with, and valuation is also not one of them. The 2 things that we deal with is on the portfolio management side. So there is a disparity, and I think it's the stuff that you do is science fiction. It's amazing stuff, I mean, but on a much lower level, there is a disparity between the data that's available and the data that's publicly there. I mean, we all know how to go to lots of different patent and trademark offices and find our data, and the data that we can actually access in a convenient way. And I think that it's a serious problem. And if something new happens somewhere in the world, we're not notified, and so there's no, companies don't have real-time data on what their IP actually is, and the old way of doing things, which is there is a foreign firm that receives a letter and reports the letter to a local firm that then goes on to report the letter to the company, is still the way that things are done, even though the new letter that has been received actually shows up online somewhere on the day that it has been received, or on the day later, and it could be picked up somewhere from that database and forwarded in a more sophisticated way with a notification. It's a much more basic problem than a problem that needs AI for solving. But it is the fact that companies don't actually know what their IP is, I think, is a serious problem. And that's a problem that we're engaging with all the time. And I can tell you that it's a difficult problem. It's part of the reason that it's a difficult problem is that the patent offices need to move on and need to open up and be more cooperative, because the patent and trademark offices are actually intentionally making it difficult to get that data. So they're blocking access to data that's supposed to be in the public domain, which is insane. It's other government institutions are opening up, they have open data projects and are opening up APIs and are telling you, come and take that data because it's public data. And some patent offices are doing it, whilst some patent offices are blocking access intentionally, which is just unbelievable. So we're engaging with that problem. Companies should know what IP they have and should know it straight away and not wait for 2 letters to come with 2 invoices a month later. And the pricing, so when I say pricing, I mean how much does prosecution cost us? Not what our IP, how our IP is valued. That's a different issue. I don't know how valuation is done. It's a complete mystery to me. But how much does IP actually cost us is a very interesting and relevant question. And I find it weird that some people just dismiss that question. But I think that most companies are under increasing and ongoing budget pressures, and they actually need to know whether what their IP costs them is what that is. Again, how much does it cost is what we're paying market prices, and have an ongoing supply of data whether what they're paying makes sense. It doesn't mean that they want to make any changes. It doesn't mean that they want to change suppliers. But companies need to know what their data is, whether their decisions are actually sensible. And again, we're in that space. So we in our Clever dashboard, we supply that sort of data as an automated service. And I can tell you that most of the companies are not being sensible. And many companies don't want to know that they're not being sensible. But when we ask companies now, what would you have done if you knew that you're, for example, paying beyond market prices in certain jurisdictions, then they tell us, well, we would have acted. And how would you have acted? Well, for example, we would have renegotiated. And renegotiation is a very effective technique when you have relevant data that you can actually use. The IP market is a market where overpricing does happen. Of course, it never happens to any of the customers of the private practice people in this room, but it does happen in this. It does happen in this market, and it does happen in some jurisdictions. So that's what I mean by pricing. Two more things that I think data can help with.
Okay, quickly. Yeah.
One is, I think it's been mentioned, competitive analytics. More and more products are popping up, and that's absolutely fantastic. The access level to this product, I think, is on a corporate level, which is today's corporate day. So I suspect that most of the participants here would actually have access to corporate level products. But it's not. Most companies don't have any access to competitive analysis kind products, so that's something that we're very interested in. Citation analysis is a completely is an evolving field that a lot can be done on. So we have patents. And where are they being mentioned? What does that mean? What can we do with it? If an Airbus patent is being cited in an examination report, do we want to know about it? Do we want to know the relevance level? Do we want to act on it? Do we want to file an opposition? These sort of things, which again, very relevant things. And if we ignore these things, then are we doing our job properly?
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. And there might, if there's somebody here from the Intellectual Property Right Office here, the EPO, I'm sure they would have some comments to your your argument of stopping access and data.
So the APO is the best one. The APO are the only ones that are being okay.
Okay, yeah, because I know that you can enter that database with APIs, and you might want to clean some of the data. But it's also very good to hear that there are organizations that help companies with, I would call it, transaction cost efficiency, and I think that is a very effective service provision to have. Okay, and we can get to the last one, and then we will have a quick panel debate after that, and then open to the audience. So. Nicola, your 6 minutes.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So I will just give you a little contribution from a professor. So it's my point of view, is a point of view of a scholar who try to solve some problems, some scientific research, and now and then maybe there is some new things that is found, and then maybe at the university we want to patent it. And so this morning I learned a lot from these panelists, and in my personal experience, the first thing I noticed is once Satish said before, it was product lives. I mean, if you're thinking about a product with a short life, then it has a certain importance in considering the opportunity of patenting that. If not, if it is a long life product, maybe of course it is much crucial to obtain a patent, because in my experience I had very long process of patenting from the national from patent to extension and so on. And the other thing that I think is important is has been already mentioned before, is TRL, so the technology readiness level, which is a very interesting instrument. I mean, for us to understand what are the readiness of the technology we are proposing, and I'm sure everyone knows in this room the levels, from first levels which concern the basic principle, this little lab proof, up to the 9th highest level, which is related to a product which is ready for the market. And in my opinion, I think that this sort of parameter can be used also in artificial intelligence as a very important marker for the classifying and valuing an idea. Because if I buy, as a large company, buy a patent which is a very low TRL, that is, maybe I have to invest more and more money before I can get something useful. And if I buy a patent at the highest level, maybe it is more direct access to exploitation into the market. And so this morning I was talking with my colleague panelists, and we discussed just something I think is quite interesting. So, in the artificial intelligence algorithms, in my opinion, it is a very crucial point to use these quality parameters for the ideas that are being patenting. And there is also the old ways that has been mentioned by Zeb of handling the patents. And I think that there is also a middle level, I mean, between the old ways and the artificial intelligence, there are many other algorithms that can be used to handle the very large databases of patents. And I am referring to what we call computational intelligence. So computational intelligence is not exactly the same as artificial intelligence. The most famous example are the neural networks. So the neural networks can be used, in my opinion, to solve. Of course, you will never solve all the problems with a neural network, but it can be used as an aid to handling IP. Other than, of course, many other topics of computational intelligence, such as genetic algorithms, fuzzy logic, and also swarm intelligence. So this is my question to the panelists and all of you. So,
thank you very much. So if I can just ask a couple of questions before we open for debate, and if we can have quite quick answers, so we can hear what everyone else has to say too. Some of the things that comes up has really been related to transparency in relationship to, well, transparency of first of all, of course, the entire database of patents and intellectual property rights. And there's been some research around that. And one of the, as many of you have mentioned, is that, of course, there is this whole thing of finding out what is really what you have in your database, but also in relationship to difficulty assessing the degree of novelty or originality and the TL level of the IP. This is in an EU framework program for the OECD. 45% of companies says that's a huge problem, and I just so this is related to the quality of the patents, and also when we have more than 30% saying that the description in the patent document is not clear. And for a person skilled in the art, it's actually difficult to understand. You have to understand the person who actually did the patent, so you have to have the network alongside it. So I just want to hear a little bit, how does analytics solve some of these problems on transparency in terms of the quality and of the patent, what's there? And that relates to one of the things we also talked about in relationship to pricing IP, which I now can hear that's completely different from valuing IP. Also, in terms of for people who own patents, large companies, they say the difficulty in that we have almost 60% saying that have problems accessing the economic value of IP, and as many say that it is as big problem in negotiating the price of the IP, and up to 90 IP negotiations that starts actually fall through and never finishes. So I just want to hear, how can the role of AI and these new methods actually help us to get through some of the project transparency and valuing and pricing? And if you could be quite quick, and then after that we can open up to maybe to the audience. So Nigel, do you want to go first here?
So I had lunch yesterday with Satish, and he told me the funniest story ever. So I'd like him to share it with the audience. It's a patent which begins with the word irradiator.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's a very transparency-related patent. I was working for a company which was active in lighting, and I found that I had missed a pretty important patent, which was there, but I could not find it. Believe it or not, it was a patent from Fiat, and there was it was about the headlamps, and there was no word about lamps or lights or whatever you say. The headlamps were defined as a radiator. Now, when you get a patent from Fiat about a radiator, you have a particular picture in mind, and it's not headlamps. So yes, that is right there, and to tell you to the truth, I don't see what the solution to this problem might be, other than just learn once and try to search for a radiator also next time.
Okay. So I'm going to offer a suggested solution to that problem, and it relates to neural networks, it relates to AI, it relates to everything I've devoted my life to for the last 5 years. And of course, there's lots of metadata associated with patterns. But in the world where the only software you have can look at words, then you're looking for a lamp, you put in lamp or light and pray that you'll find the pattern relating, which is called radiator, and of course you don't find it. So what's the answer? Well, the answer is artificial intelligence. You can look at all the data at the same time. There were citations, already mentioned by Zeb, there were citations associated with that patent, and maybe the FCA, the Fiat patent, referred to patents from GE. That would have been a clue. There are codes associated with patents, CPC codes, IPC codes. Some of those relate to light, and some of them relate to heat. And if there were more light citations on there, and then there are words and there are context. There are inventors. Maybe the inventors throughout history, those inventors had only ever invented bulbs. So, so the answer to it is to understand the problem and then go and design technology answers. There are some questions, just to not make it sound like AI can solve all problems. They can help. Number one is AI is there to assist humans and work in collaboration with humans. And the second of all is where there are fundamental blockages in getting the data. And 20%, everyone knows I quote this stat all the time, 20% of ownership data at patent offices is wrong. Yeah. So clearly there's a very significant problem when you're analyzing ownership and BVD grouping and cipher grouping. You can spend, and that's not an AI problem, that's a labor of manual love as we work harder and harder. And a quick plug for the Open Register. We are running a global project to try and get companies to disclose what they own.
Yeah, that reminds me, when I was a student many years back, my first student job was actually to put in, where the US Patent and Trademark Office was putting all their patent data prior to 1967 on the intranet or digitally. I was actually inputting all the many data from Canada, which has 6, 7 digits, and I can just remember running these into afterwards. You have to run it and go look in the patent office to see if you had some problems. I can imagine it's all humanly put in, particular historical data. So, do you have any comments to transparency and?
I have a comment to that story, and it's not my field at all. But searching images for lamp is a well-documented problem in AI, and Google Images are doing it. So yeah. looking through the image data and searching for lamp would have found it.
Yeah, this thing happened about 15 years back when there was no artificial intelligence in the searching tools.
Exactly. And at that point,
so that's exactly my point, that now it is difficult to have these kind of misses, which used to be pretty common in old times. And I'm not jealous of guys before my time when they used to go to USPTO and sit and do manual index card searches for patents. Yeah. And I can imagine how difficult it would have been to really look at any patent information at that time.
The only difference is that you actually had to go and you had to dig it out on microfilm if you didn't have it physically, and you actually got to see the drawing, you saw the writing, you found the author. Just you became very familiar with this, and when that was the only way, clearly there comes a business model around that. Nicola, last comment from you, and we'll open up for questions from the audience.
No, it reminds me a lot the work of Altschuler with the theory of inventive theory, which he was a Russian man who analyzed, I think, 200,000 patents.
Smuggler? Was it a smuggler? Who did it?
Altschuler. It's in our field, is sort of famous research and engineering. So he developed.
Is the trees, the guy who developed trees?
Trees. Yeah. Yes, that's right. So and the old trees come up from this 20 years hard work of.
I know. Yeah. Okay, so I think we should take maybe about 10 minutes left. So why don't we just start with 3 questions from the audience? Yeah, here. Well, if you can say your name and where you're from.
Yeah, my name is Ina Novikov.
Yeah, but a speaker coming.
My name is Ina Novikov. I'm a partner in the largest Israel private patent office. And my question is that it was very interesting about using technology in data analysis and applying of big data intelligence to patent field and so on. But any portfolio starts from drafting and from decision what to draft and from real drafting. And I'd like to know whether someone of panelists can say something about technology in drafting process, because for today it's fully manual and
you mean drafting the algorithms?
Yes, some technology which helps in drafting, because today it is fully manual, very time consuming and also very costly for clients. So whether you can...
so draft the algorithms?
No, to draft the application.
Draft the application, okay,
yeah.
Draft application, great, okay, so question, draft application. Next question. Yes, if you say your name and where you're from.
My name is Adele Kalamospecchia. I'm a senior IP counsel from Philips Lighting, so I'm from the Netherlands, although I'm Italian. My question is from Ziv. I was very curious to know about what you said. The offices are blocking data, the access to data. Is there a reasoning behind this? Do they provide a reason to users? And then following up what Nigel was saying, that we don't have to be afraid, we need to engage with technology. Actually, in everyday activity with brand protection, we engage with the technology. Every time we screen the website to look and spot counterfeiters. But then it's up to the IP Council's responsibility to decide if we are willing to tolerate the abusers or if we need to really be strict and take down the website. So this is an approach that can be done with the use of technology as an example of real life technology uses.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next question, last question here, or not last, but last in this round here.
Christian Bunky from Alban. I'd like to ask the panelists how they think the IP professional will change, say, in 5 years' time because of all of these tools, and what's needed from this audience in how to evolve and to be adding more value.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, so if I can just, I'll just allocate some questions, and then you can, of course, decide if you would prefer to take another one. But if I just allocate first one to Nigel here, this thing of that, you know, we hear about AI tools can now draft articles for newspapers with the same kind of flair as a certain journalist have, or rewrite articles and rewrite. Why can't it just, because if we know all this, it costs some lawyers, pay my lawyers so much money to draft that application, whenever that's bulletproof, it will get filed. Why can't we just let a computer program draft your application? It's not just possible. If you can just, like, really have to be short, if you can do 3 more rounds, I think it's more interesting also to hear the questions people have, so just like less than a minute on this or 1 minute on this drafting.
Okay, less than a minute on the role of IP across professions. So number one is there is a Japanese Book Award. For the first time ever, one of the shortlisted books was written by a computer. So do I believe that computers have a role to play in drafting patents? There's a company called iProver that uses computers to invent. There are companies already helping with the specification compilation done by computers. Some problems are just too hard for AI today, and will be, to your question, problems that AI can probably get to tomorrow, like claims drafting. So the thing is, don't push AI any, it's not magic, it's just an algorithm. So let's all be careful not to, well, of course not to be frightened of it, to do what it can do, but also we recognize what it can't do. So at the moment, AI can support patent drafting, but can't do all your job, which is a good thing, because that's the years of experience you have to get it right.
Thank you so much. And Sif, this thing of patent IP officers blocking access, you can be very quick on this. I know that's something we could discuss the rest of the day. But what is this issue? You know, how serious is it, and what can be done? And then there was attached to that also questions around being afraid of technology and security. Is that kind of related to that issue?
I don't think so. I think that it's just common practice to block access, and the people coding these sites are the same people coding other sites, and it's just what everybody does. And it does seem like most patent offices have some idea of open access program that they're discussing at some stages, but they haven't concluded yet. Mm-hmm. So the general policy is let's block access to their usual sites until we figure it out. I mean, there is a justification to block bot access to give humans to access to the data, because if too many bots access the site, it could create pressure, but it's not really.
And Nicola, just quickly, do you think this is part of the kind of the big data revolution, where we all organizations are criticized for not letting the data go loose and be shared because of there's this security element of it? So in the AI revolution, we always talk about how do we unlock data. How can we do business-to-business sharing of data? It's not just patent data. This is an issue too. Do you have a view on that?
No, I don't have a view. It's very difficult problem to this.
Okay.
I don't feel so much qualified to, because it's large.
It's a large issue, yeah. Okay, and then as it is, what is the future of the AI profession in less than a minute? And
I'm happy I got that.
We couldn't ask Nigel, because he would say there wouldn't be any future. There would be robots.
I'm happy I got that question, because this is a question which is very close to my heart. The IP professionals have to develop into more strategic role. A lot of the regular repetitive work they do will be done by machines or algorithms. So they have to become thought leaders. They have to go into the CXO pack. They probably will be direct consultants to the CEOs and CFOs of the companies, and they have to get themselves ready for that. So they have to get ready to be one of the strategic leaders of the company. And that is one thing that I have seen some movement, but not a lot of movement. So a lot of patent leaders of the companies have to start behaving like more and more like strategic leaders.
Yeah, so they become much more empowered within the company. So my strategic last part of this session here, but we only have a couple of minutes, is we literally take two more questions, just three more questions, and then we'll do a final round, and then you can choose to answer the questions, but also come with what your kind of main concluding part is on the importance of technology in managing IP. So can we just get 3 questions? Your name and where you're from, and in the blue.
Hi, my name is Will. I'm from Sky, and I was just interested in what Satish said then about becoming IP professionals, becoming strategic leadership. And I mean, I don't know how it works within Airbus, but in Sky, IP is part of legal, and there's a certain system there already in a politics and lots of relationships. I mean, are you thinking about IP sort of breaking out of legal, or always operating within legal?
So IP's boundaries within legal or across different disciplines. One more question? One more question? Yeah, we have one here. Yeah, your name, where you're from?
I'm Alistair Russell from Hoffman Eitler. My question is this. How reliable is it to rely on big data analytics? In my view, the content of a patent application or a patent is very specific and may not be susceptible to statistical analysis. So could you be leading yourself down the garden path if you follow the route of the numbers rather than the specifics of the patent claims?
Yeah, so the bias is in analytics, yeah. And so I'm told your time is out. So what I will do, I will basically give the panel here just a chance to sum up, and you might want to answer the questions on the boundaries from Sky and then analytics. Yeah.
I'll take the question about IP and legal. In Airbus, we have already evolved beyond that. So IP doesn't only report to legal, and it's not only in legal. IP has two solid line reportings to the general counsel of the company and to the CTO. And that itself gives some freedom already, because you are not completely in one envelope, you are in two envelopes. And that means you are an envelope of your own. And, just goes like that. So engineering, technology, these are also the functions that IP has to be very closely integrated with. And in Airbus, luckily, we are already closely integrated with these functions.
Thank you. Yeah, Steve.
Well, sum up.
Yeah, this is your last chance. Yes.
Yeah. I guess it touches on one of I think it touches on Christian's question actually, and I think it was the point made over there as well. The future of the profession and how private practice firms are going to evolve. In the next 5 years, we're going to see a lot of these conferences and are going to have lots of interesting discussions. Is the profession actually going to evolve? No. 10 years, yes. So it's going to take some time, but it's inevitable because there's better ways to do things.
Thank you very much. And Nigel?
And the question about trusting technology when patents are complicated reminds me of a question in the last conference I attended, which was this. The patent attorney in the room was asked whether he would trust a car autonomously to drive him through an urban area, to which he said, of course, the technology is very advanced. And the other question was, would you trust a computer to analyze a patent? And he goes, no, it's way too complicated.
Yeah, thank you. And Nicola, you get the final word.
Yeah, I think it could be helpful increase the culture of IP at every level, at the universities and conferences and the companies sharing knowledge, and so just increase the culture of IP. And so I'm so grateful to this conference.
Thank you very much, and I'm sure we've had a fantastic morning here on the importance of technology and automation in managing IP, and we can continue the discussion during the day. So we just say thank you to the panel.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot to the panel, especially to Birgit for managing that. A lot of interesting topics and really interesting stuff. So let me continue with the next speaker and standalone presentation. Patents Tell the Truth, Technology Trend Analysis from Jochen Spuck, patent expert at the Swiss Federal Institute for IP Research.
I will not keep you off your coffee more than 50 minutes, so please just be patient for a couple of minutes and longer. Thanks a lot for the possibility to talk here. Just shortly on patent analysis, how we do it. Actually, we are the Swiss Patent Office, and we're open to share every hour data if you like. Just ask us. Besides those which are not published yet. Those which are published, however, we try to analyze a bit more frequently to make them more attractive to be used. And I'll quickly show you on one example, really dig into one example, how we do treat these things and how we make them available to you as a service provider. And in this particular case, I choose one topic which is rather important, at least for most of us in the future. This is digital health. I take this example because it has many different facets, especially digital in it and health on the other hand. And most of you will anyway, at least shortly, be or on long term be influenced by new technology in the health environment, being a watch measuring all your whatever things it measures, or your stomach sensors sending signals to your doctor whatsoever. So this will come, and we want to see how that works and what is happening in there. Quite simply, how we do that, first of all, pharma medtech is both topics we have focused here. And digital, in our definition, is quite simply, we put everything into digital, which is communication, which is computer technology, which is IT methods for management, business methods like hospital management service or whatsoever. Robotics and a couple of others I've not mentioned here. It's mainly those digital areas, and we cut those with the medical areas and the health environment to see what is actually happening. This is not only a cross-classified system, but also keyword search, etc. But we'll keep out of the details. What is interesting for us is really just what's happening in that digital environment. This is first approach quite simply. We have put here a bit of a perspective on countries, country activity by the inventor's address. And the first concept we are using here is actually word-class patterns. We have found that in most visualizations or in most analysis that about 10 or not, maybe even 20% of all the patterns are relevant for the world, and all those others are interesting and particularly special for the inventor or by somebody else, but in the global view, they're more not worth the paper they're written on. So if we focus on the 10% of the patterns which are relevant for the world, we have a bit of a different view on those things. We don't have to look at those about 4 million active Chinese patent families, and also not on those few thousand Swiss patent families. So we will look at the world-class patents, and you see that in that area in medtech, for example, the US is leading very strongly, while the EU has a bit of a slower amount of patent in that area. China is in an important area, so they have also important patents. The UK, for example, as an example, is in the same range. So this is patents which are getting which have a broad coverage in the family, or they got a lot of citations later on. Just one step back, 10% about currently of those patents are digitalized. So this is a digital share currently we have found in all those medtech patents. If you take it on pharma and biotech, then it's even less. The share of digital patents is going down from 5 in the US to about 3% or so. So this is a rather small share. On the other hand, if you're on a medtech and pharma conference, everybody's talking about nothing else but digital. So this is what we find in patents. And now we look a bit closer. For the UK, in the European competition, let's say we're about here. Switzerland for us, it's about here. This is digitalized medtech. And just remember that, for example, in Switzerland, we have about 55,000 employees working in medtech. And we have about 150 or so patents world-class in digital. For the UK, it's a bit better, but the amount is still rather low. In pharma and biotech, this is, for example, gene databases and things like that. It's even less. It's very tiny figures. So UK is still with the people, at least in Europe, and something is happening. So let's see what's happening. This is the world activity in digital medtech. You see quite an interesting typical curve you have everywhere currently. It is probably also a bit of first step digitization, making an analog report digital. Next phase, digitalization, making your data work for you better to do something or do a communicative instrument. The next phase would probably be digital transformation. So selling your data, your gene databases to the world is then probably the bigger asset than anything you do it before in the pharmacological round. For the UK, it's looking a bit similar. Small figures, but a bit of the same wave style, but no explosion. That's one point we wanted to see. If you look for the share and overall, you still have to remember it is small compared to the world. Pharma biotech, similar approach, similar area, even worse. We have a lot of red ones. This means it's just they are inactive now. So nice try, but well, not succeeded. We have a bit of an increase now coming from probably also from China, but also from other countries like Korea. Not really an explosion, but it is the same wave curve again. If we take it for the UK, the problem here is we just have too few patents here. This is not statistics. This is just few and no explosion again. But so far, it is still something is happening. That is the first point. It's just not enough, probably, but anyway, it's happening. Really, then to take a closer look on which type of companies are in that field. Are there only big players? That means those here. These are very big players, multinationals. Then we have these violet and gray ones. This is the small companies having about 2 to 25 or 10 to 50 patents in total, active patents. So this is startups, SMEs, some middle-sized companies. And you see this, the same picture is more or less everywhere. About 1/3 or so are smaller ones, and the rest is for the big ones. And the same is for pharma. The same again. In the UK, actually, there's a bit more than an average on the smaller ones, which is quite interesting. Though there's also happening things in the small environment. And typically, this is the area which is rather hard for companies to survive very long in that digital environment. Now let's take a look on what's happening in there from the different perspective. Now we have seen that there is an increase in the world in the last 5 years or 6 years in this digital medtech environment, and now we have digital health. I actually put all together because it doesn't make sense to differentiate any longer. Anything which is digital health in the last 6 years or so, and now we take it down to UK, and we want to see who the players are. Quite simply, the players behind here are big ones like a Johnson & Johnson, then there's a ResMed, there's Medtronic, companies you know quite well for medtech environment, and all of those are are now based down to inventor address in the UK or an applicant address in the UK. Just remember, behind the Johnson & Johnson, just behind that bubble, is not only the Johnson & Johnson patents, it's all the variations of Johnson & Johnson and J&J's, etc. names. It's all the subsidiaries behind it, which they have bought by, which you can find in merger and acquisition databases or news report, etc., etc. This is a manually driven database. There's 8 people working on nothing else but putting patents under one name and then under a name tag. And this, if you have done that ever once yourself, you know how hard that is. I've had it 3 days once. I worked for a company having a portfolio of 300 patents. I ended up with finding those 300. And with the tool here I'm using here, I had it in 2 minutes. I had the same amount, besides just one was not correct allocated. So this is really extremely powerful, and for us it's very easy to get a picture out of it. You probably can't read all of them, but the picture here is nothing else but a benchmark situation. So we have digital health for UK, that's a data set. We can choose everything else. And you see, for example, where you are. A company like CMR Surgical, this is a UK-based company doing nice surgical robots. And it has quite an interesting portfolio, about 52 or so. And here on that axis is the average quality of those patents. And everything be up from 2.3 upwards is world-class. So you see already those patents are on average already really good. But there are others like ResMed, and very few of those Johnson & Johnson patents behind that. There's even a higher average, so they're probably more interesting to look at them. At least more interesting to look at these compared to those. But that doesn't mean that these down here are not interesting. Absolutely not. But you have to prioritize, because otherwise, how do you treat all those patents around? It's just impossible to read through all them. We are reading about 500 a day in the office. Not reading, we don't read anyone. We examine all these or scan these, but if I'm in a bigger area like here, or in even bigger areas, I just can't do that anymore. What's also interesting is other companies like Smith & Nephew, a really big player, is also a British player here, has rather few patents. For big players like that, probably they're not invented anymore in the UK. That happens very often. Nowadays, or like in pharma as well, the invention is going through in the US, for example, or in China, not any longer here. But unfortunately, that's the case, but still they are there. Others like Smith Group has also something, and I've put Oxford Nanopore here, a company which is now in California. Very interesting things. And if you take a look there, you see already, and you can't read it, but you can see it later on, there's also Microsoft, there's Apple, Intel. There's more companies actually already in the UK around, in the UK area. But if you look at that worldwide, oh, sorry, I have to skip, I have to another one before. If you look worldwide, then you see that those tech companies coming into that very strongly. But I see that in a minute. So this is a benchmark view in a certain area. And what companies typically do is they want to see those small companies. Typically, bigger companies nowadays, they scan the market for smaller companies. And that's what we do as well here. This is a target analysis. So we're looking at those 20 or 30 interesting smaller companies having a smaller portfolio. So this is about 2 to 7 or so patents, which is quite small. Some of those are really interesting, high interesting players having really interesting tiny tiny, small patent portfolios, but they're ready to get grabbed by the bigger ones. This is a typical analysis which is done by the large companies nowadays, and this is rather normal in that business. The problem here is you have to set up your patents properly for that field. If it's everything mixed between everything, then it doesn't make sense to analyze. Oh, I've nearly gone through, but I only have three slides more. This is in that area, the digital health area, the tech companies. You see already how strong they are. Beside that Philips bar, this is Samsung already, Alphabet, Intel, Microsoft, Qualcomm. They're going really strongly here, and they're coming. This is countries. You see this is Britain, quite nice. Switzerland, quite nice, but this is China. And this is Korea, this is Germany. This probably will increase even stronger. And this is now why I'm talking about those things in digital health. This is all those hot topics we are nowadays discussing in the news, like blockchain, deep learning, CRISPR, robotics. But if you look at this curve, this is a business. So there you have to take care currently. These others will come. But nowadays, you have to control these areas. If you don't do, then you're lost. And that's finally, for me, in that moment, what we really want to show very, very briefly is we're doing technology areas. We're analyzing them for the players around. And we try to find, we have about 100, currently close to 100 technologies ready at hand to see what's happening in there and what the cross-relations are, who is doing blockchain in medtech, for example. And these things can be extracted really quickly nowadays. We also play using machine learning now, a supervised learning engine who's in that, which is currently able to categorize and break down patterns very strongly into concepts and categories. During my talk, I would have been able to analyze already 100,000 patterns at the same time, breaking it down to the 500 relevance in 5 categories. This is what is currently doable. The question is how good it is yet, but well, it will improve anyway. And that's what we currently imply in our office to be more efficient. And now I'm gone. I'm ready for your questions, or you are ready for your coffee probably. Oh. Oops, sorry.
Yeah, I would, first of all, thanks a lot. I would suggest for the sake of time to have the questions during the coffee break, which is with 1 hour quite long, yeah, and gives us time for all interconnections, questions, and so on. So thanks a lot for the very interesting presentation about what is being done in Switzerland. Now we have Lindsay Carey, a partner from White & Case, with another standalone presentation.
Thank you. Morning, everybody. My name's Lindsay Canning. I'm a partner in the global IP practice at White & Case here in London, and it's great to be here. What I'm going to do today is take you on a little whistle-stop tour of some of the key areas that might trip you up when you do a cross-border license. My practice involves transactional IP in any context, whether that's M&A, deals, joint ventures, freestanding license agreements, and also lots of commercial agreements from manufacturing and supply through outsourcing to IT in a variety of sectors. Many of the matters I work on are cross-border in nature. I've spent time living and working recently for 5 years in New York, so I'm used to negotiating licenses under different legal systems and in a variety of market conditions. So why does, just move that on, why does an international or a cross-border license throw up a whole raft of additional issues over and above those which the usual suspects you always have to deal with when you're dealing in a domestic-focused license? Well, the answer is because of the application of local law principles to you due to international law principles. And that applies even irrespective, actually, of your choice of governing law clause. And it happens because of where the IP that you're licensing subsists or where your counterparty is incorporated or based. These default rules vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction and from IP right to IP right. In order to avoid or mitigate the potential gotchas they give rise to, we need to know about them and know the potential strategies, contractual or otherwise, to deal with them. And that's where local law advice in this area really is very, very important. So if you particularly have a material license, in terms of revenues for you in a jurisdiction if you're a licensor, or a killer piece of technology or a brand as a licensee that underpins your business, local law advice is really, really the one thing I could recommend. Here are the themes we're going to whistle through. We're necessarily going to have to touch on them in a high-level way. It's not a comprehensive list by any stretch of the imagination. And as I say, necessarily, we're going to have to just scratch the surface. But hopefully it gives you a flavour for those who haven't done cross-border licenses of what's involved. So without further ado, let's go. First point is the risk of license or insolvency. This is a biggie. The key risk here is that depending on where your licensor is incorporated, because the insolvency rules of that place of incorporation or where they're based will apply to them if they go insolvent, your biggest risk is that you as a licensee can lose the rights that you have paid a lot of money for, even if you've paid that money up front. There's a second important but subsidiary risk, an ancillary risk, and that is you might still benefit from your rights, so you can still continue to use the licensed technology or brand, but you lose somehow the benefit of some key obligations that you've placed on your licensor. Big examples there being obviously maintenance, enforcement, those kind of things. And of course that can leave you without the protections that you really need to make the license work for you. This does vary enormously actually from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and often on the type of insolvency regime within those jurisdictions or the IP right. There are various different ways that may or may not work to insolvency-proof the license, so to mitigate or avoid these risks. And again, they're quite complicated. As we'll see in a couple of examples I'll give you in a second, they are untested to a large degree. This area evolves, so key to get expert local advice. I find here having an international network is absolutely key to what I do. The big problem that I'm aware of, which I've actually experienced live on a deal, is the position in Germany. Under Section 103 of the German Insolvency Code, an administrator appointed over an insolvent estate must elect to continue executory contracts. Because of the continuing obligations that are invariably in license agreements, like ongoing royalty payments, maintenance and enforcement obligations, quality control, pretty much every license is going to class as an executory contract. And that means that basically the insolvency administrator can decide whether your license rights survive or not. You can go to them early on and make a request for them to make a decision to hopefully mitigate the uncertainty that this causes you. But they're in control. If they elect not to adopt the executory contract, you can't use the IP anymore. Any subsequent use of it would potentially be infringement. And the weak position in Germany is exacerbated really by the fact that those insolvency proofing mechanisms I mentioned are largely untested, and it's an evolving area. You've got some options. You could go for a fully fulfilled license agreement so that it isn't an executory contract, which means an upfront fee and no obligations on either side. But whoever really sees a license like that in a freestanding context. You could try a suspended assignment of the IP on the condition that the license is terminated. That's been upheld by the German Federal Court, but is still open to challenge, particularly on the sort of grounds that we have here in the UK under our insolvency rules, things like equivalent to a transaction at an undervalue, preferring one creditor over another, and the clawback that can entail. You could grant what they call a license usufruct of the IP, which is a right in rem, or you could do what we did in our deal, and you can take a separate IP pledge over the IP license by your German licensor. What that does is it secures the licensee's future claims for damages in the event that the insolvency administrator decides not to fulfil the obligations under the agreement. We, in that instance, had 4 licensors, 3 from the other side in this big M&A deal and 1 on our side. And we had to consider the insolvency position in those 3 countries that those licensors were incorporated. The other side, by the way, also had a licensor outside of the US where they were used to doing things, and they just assumed that the benefits of the US Bankruptcy Court 365N would apply. No. So it's a really big thing to make sure you're on top of. Just by way of juxtaposition, if it will work. No. The UK is in that second category. So our liquidation regime would allow a liquidator to disclaim onerous property. So obligations in a license, such as continuing enforcement, continuing registration and maintenance, can be seen as onerous. So again, you don't lose your rights. The prevailing view is you don't lose your rights as a licensee when a liquidator disclaims, but you lose the benefit of those obligations. Again, raft of potential insolvency proofing mechanisms that may or may not work. Conditional springing assignments with the clawback problems, thank you. Option of acquiring the IP, again, same problems. How do you set the value? When do you set your trigger? Step-in rights, we often use this one for paying the fees. So hopefully it's not an onerous obligation. You can deal with it yourself anyway. Or a fixed charge over the IP, so that the losses incurred due to that any disclaimer over those are secured, provided you register that charge properly at the IPO and the company's house. Software escrow, also an important thing. License registration, won't spend too long on this, you're probably very familiar with this. The benefits of license registration differ between jurisdictions and are determined by local law again. In some jurisdictions it's mandatory to register to be able to enforce your license. Some examples of the benefits that you can take advantage of if you register your license: the ability to enforce your license rights if you've got statutory or contractual enforcement rights as a licensee, and also ensuring that subsequent purchasers or licensees don't take free of your rights. As we know, also here in the UK, the ability to be awarded litigation costs if your licence, patents or trademarks are infringed is also subject to a registration time frame of 6 months from effective date. Always wise to include provisions to deal with this, address the matter. Licensees need to have the right to record if they want to with assistance from the licensor. At the end of the licence, the other way around, licensor needs the right to remove the recorders and get assistance, and then you always have to deal with who pays for that. It's always a balancing act, really, between what might happen to you if you don't register and the hassle and cost of doing it. It's usually the licensee that's more at risk, so they usually want to look into it. Enforcement, again, expressly address it. Basic rule, I suppose, of thumb internationally would be that exclusive licensees often have the right under statute to enforce themselves, non-exclusive not. But we do know from our experience in the UK trademark arena that that's not always the case. Example, again, in Germany, an exclusive licensee of a trademark can take action only if they have the consent of the owner, so you need to put that in your contract. These local law principles, again, vary by default. Your default position can mean you have an enforcement position you don't want. So you need to know about it so you can know whether you can contract out of it. The UPC is interesting here. That obviously has automatic and exclusive jurisdiction over unitary patents, but also over European patents that haven't been opted out. You can license national designations of European patents, obviously, for different territories. And you could also license a unitary patent in the whole or part of the territory. An exclusive licensee has an automatic right under the UPC system to enforce unless you take that away from him, vice versa for a non-exclusive. And of course, because of the beauty, in a sense, of the Unified Patents Court, that you can go and get a pan-European injunction, but the risk that if somebody is successful in a revocation counterclaim, you lose your patent across the whole community. You've got a problem here, potentially, particularly in licenses that may exist now of European patents, because if your exclusive licensee in every jurisdiction has an automatic right to take that in front of the UPC, they can do that. Say Mr. Licensee in France does it, they lose, patent gets knocked out. Not only are you as the owner in trouble, but also are all the other exclusive licensees in other jurisdictions. So wise to have a look at your licenses and figure out whether you want to opt in or opt out. I'll mention very briefly withholding taxes. Always address them in a cross-border license. National rules basically often apply to say that a licensee has to withhold a portion of the royalties if they're going cross-border. And even though that might not be the case right now for you because of the application of double taxation treaties or tax credits across jurisdictions, tax regimes change. Licenses live a long time. You need to address it. So typically you'll have a debate about whether you're grossing up or not grossing up, because the way that the withholding taxes work, licensee withholds an amount, licensor gets less in his pocket on the other side of the Atlantic or wherever he happens to be. He'll want to gross up so he's not out of pocket. You as a licensee will say, well, hang on a minute, if you do manage to get a tax credit in your jurisdiction, that means you've got a windfall. Compromise position, if they manage to do that, then you reimburse them a reasonable proportion. So hopefully everybody's in the same position. Always need licensee assistance provisions. Get them to give you a receipt so that you can apply for tax credits if you're a licensor. Get them to help you make an application. And last but not least, watch what's going on from an antitrust perspective. We all know, we're familiar with the rules in the EU. Don't assume that things that work in the EU will work elsewhere. I know there's differences between the EU and the US on this. And just to give you one example, and then I'll close, exclusive grant backs. We know that they are an excluded restriction under the TTBE if they require a licensee to exclusively license to the licensor or assign the licensee's improvements in the relevant technology. Non-exclusive grant backs okay, even if they're non-reciprocal. That is also a problem. I've seen it in Chinese law, something equivalent, and other jurisdictions. So just watch what you're doing. The consequences of getting it wrong, as we know, can be astronomical. Invalidity of your agreement, massive fines, behavioural remedies, damages claims which are on the up, injunctions. Thanks very much. That's it from me. I'll be around for coffee. So if anybody has any questions, I'd love to take them. Thanks very much.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot. And I can assure you that these are highly relevant topics since we are facing some of these as a company. Yeah, well, it's up for questions during the break, and we'll be all back here at 11:55.